In this video, we'll be talking about natal moon in Scorpio and what this placement means in a general sense, and different traits when you have this placement or when somebody has this placement in their chart that you know. So with that being said, what the moon represents in astrology is it represents our emotions and our sense of security. It rules the fourth house, which is about family, emotions, and our deepest inner selves. So the moon shows a internal aspect of our personality. So it just shows like our needs as well, and this is what we are on a private level. And what people usually see is they see our ascendant and our sun sign, and that's how they build their first impression. But the moon can sometimes just be something different that people only see when they get to know you on a personal level. So with the moon in Scorpio, you could be some other way on the outside, but on the inside, what people don't immediately see about you is that you are a very internally deep person, and emotions run very deep for you. You feel things very deeply. And also, the moon shows, the sign Scorpio is a fixed water sign, and fixed is about a constant way of being, and water is about feeling. So when the moon is in Scorpio, it shows somebody that tends to feel some way for very long periods of time. That's why Scorpio can show depression on the lower vibrations when the moon is here, or like feeling an emotion for like a very long time. It can also show tendencies of obsession. And sometimes when the moon is in Scorpio, it shows somebody that has this sensation that they can't help but to feel a certain way. And sometimes you can get tired of this tendency of always feeling, like you always feel a certain way or a certain emotion. And it could be tied to a certain person or to certain things that you care about, especially because the moon shows things that we care about, that we protect, and that we nurture. And for you, when it comes to emotions, you get a lot of fulfillment from secrecy, privacy. That's very important to you, and that's your way of defending the things that are close to your heart, is by keeping them private and keeping them secret. Because if people were to know those things, then they would have more power over you than you would feel comfortable with. And that's because you are somebody whose emotions run deep, and also you can't help but to feel certain things. You're not like other moon signs that may be more mutable in their way of feeling, meaning they can change what they care about. They're always jumping from thing to thing when it comes to, emotions. And also some signs can detach from emotions, but you are not one of those. Now, the positive side of the moon in Scorpio is that you're somebody that has a lot of emotional power and a lot of emotional conviction. So when it comes to things that you feel, it's like almost like the truth to you, and it's like undeniable. So you're very confident in your intuition and your convictions. And so also Scorpio is about interpersonal dynamics with other people. So people that have the moon in Scorpio, they are most comfortable in situations where they are sharing resources or sharing security with another individual. And when it comes to, dealing with other people that have the moon in Scorpio, they have a good understanding of psychology. And so they're able to manipulate circumstances in their favor. And in general, they need to have control. They have an emotional need for power or control, especially control or power that is enabled from the presence of other people in their lives. And they have this emotional conviction, like I was saying earlier, and why I want to bring this up and why I wanted to bring up interpersonal dynamics is because how this ties together is that when we are very confident or convinced, we start to influence and convince others as well. So people with the moon in Scorpio, they're very emotionally convincing, and they don't need evidence for how they feel. Like, they will convince others without even having, proof or facts of supporting how they feel. So a lot of times they can, gaslight others into believing the same things that they do, but it could be also an unconscious thing that they do. They just convince others very easily to their perspective or their way of feeling. And nobody can tell you otherwise than how you feel when you have the moon in Scorpio. And that's because your emotions run very deep, like I was saying. So your intuition is very deep and it's fixed, meaning it doesn't change. So how you feel about certain things or how you just feel in general does not change. You get very frustrated and, perhaps even competitive when people try to tell you otherwise than how you feel or try to say that you are wrong. When the moon is in Scorpio, it's in the 5th sign from its own sign. And the 5th house is all about ego. So people that have the moon in Scorpio have an emotional tie to their ego. And this is something that is subconscious to others. It's not something that is outwardly displayed, but when people try to tell a moon in Scorpio that their emotions are wrong, or that the things that they care about are wrong, or that the dynamic is not right, then these people feel that in their ego, because you are touching a part of them that is solid. The way that they feel is solid. It's like a wall. So when you try to chip away at that, you're actually invading their ego and who they are. So that's something about moon in Scorpio, is that their emotions are like a part of who they are, and how they feel is who they are. So when you're around them, you need to kind of just adapt to their reality and live in their way of seeing things. So also this placement is very attractive because, when the moon is in Scorpio, it's in the 5th from its own sign. The 5th is about ego, and it's also about entertaining, and it's also about being put on a pedestal. So Scorpio moons will often manifest situations of their emotions being put on a pedestal. So and that's attractive to others, but also, the trait of being emotionally convinced is attractive to people. And on an emotional level, they can, manifest a lot of complex psychological dynamics with other people, and a lot of like drama and entertainment, but like in an unpleasant way. But in hindsight, people can get very obsessed with the impact that this person that has the Scorpio moon has in their life, or just their energy. And Scorpio moon have this need for power and control. So again, they best get along with people that are willing to put their emotions, their needs, and their feelings on a pedestal. And of course, this can create obsession in the other people. But of course, this is every external trait is just a reflection of something that we have in ourselves. So the Scorpio moon themselves, they have a trait of obsession too. So they are careful of revealing their emotions and their vulnerabilities for that reason. But of course, from having that trait within themselves, they're able to create that same sensation in others that are not as emotionally intelligent or wise. And so also people that are willing to put them on an emotional pedestal, because again, the 5th house is about ego, and so the moon being in the 5th sign has an element of ego to the moon. So on an emotional level, they have an ego, or others will look up to them and kind of look to them for like leadership almost, at least when it comes to how to feel about things. So anyways, this placement has a seductive appeal, and like it's very attractive on an emotional level. And so that's why this placement can have the stereotype of narcissism or narcissists. but that's more of like a low vibrational moon in Scorpio. But people that have this placement that are self-aware and spiritually evolved, they'll know, when to they will know, they'll be self-aware of their enormous power to convince others and get others to live in their reality, and they'll be careful not to create self-destructive situations. That's why a moon in Scorpio cannot always show somebody that is narcissistic, because an evolved, spiritually evolved Scorpio moon will realize the responsibility to explain the way that they feel in logically sound ways. So they'll be very careful about the narrative that they build. But you will, no matter which type of moon in Scorpio you are, or that you are around, they or yourself, depending on which side you're on, they will have the temptation to just go with the easiest story, aka lie, or like come up with the most easiest way for people to just simply believe what they feel, the easiest way to convey it. But like I was saying, when you do that, then it can create complex situations. But moon in Scorpio is comfortable with complicated situations and having to uphold psychological complex dynamics. But an evolved Scorpio moon will realize the debt that comes with taking the easy explanation, and they will try to they will realize that they have a responsibility to utilize logic in tandem with their way of feeling in order to not create self-destructive situations. But a moon in Scorpio that's not evolved will go with the easiest narrative, because they don't really care about the reasoning behind what they feel. They just know that they're right. So hopefully that makes sense. Because this is the next point about this placement, is that Scorpio is about death and transformation, and it's also about complicated situations. So when you have the moon in Scorpio, you are comfortable sometimes in psychologically complicated situations. And you realize your ability to emotionally gaslight others. Though, like I was saying, you may or may not abuse this trait. And so essentially, sometimes with this placement, you unconsciously get tied up in these deep and complex interpersonal dynamics and these deep psychological dynamics. And that's because when we are so convinced of ourselves, or when we are stuck in an ego or a way of feeling, we unconsciously get others to live in our reality. And this is simply because we are more convincing than them, And then what happens with this placement is that once people start living in a certain reality that is in your way of seeing, then you need to uphold that reality. And that's where things start to get complicated. And that's where it starts to tie to your ego. And so once people, believe a certain way of seeing things, or even believe a lie, something that's not necessarily proved or true, now, you need to uphold that. And for you, that's very tied to your ego. If people contradict your way of seeing things, or if people start to believe that your way of feeling is wrong, it starts to eat away at your ego, and you do not allow that. So anyways, the next thing that I want to say that goes along with what we were talking about and brings us to the next point is that whether or not a Scorpio moon's way of feeling is sufficiently justified or true on all levels of depth, in surface level ways too, or whether or not they have physical evidence to display their correctness, they still feel convinced, and they still convince others. And, for that reason, the reason why this is because water signs are non-physical. They oppose earth signs. Earth signs are about everything that's material, provable, facts, And water signs are just emotions. They're just feelings. So when you have this placement, you're very convinced, but at the same time, it can be hard to explain your conviction. So a lot of times you have this unconscious tendency, or this automatic, reaction to just make up the most sufficient narrative or story to go along with what you feel, or what is in alignment to your ego or your way of perceiving things. And, stories has to do with the sign Sagittarius, which is right next to Scorpio. So Scorpios, at times, they can be great storytellers. They can kind of sum things up, but a lot of times they omit a lot of details, a lot of logic. They feel like the best way to explain their emotions is through a narrative or through a story. And so, anyways, they're just focused on finding some way to convey their conviction when they need to, or just make people believe it. They don't really care about the details or the facts. So sometimes this can lead them to sugarcoat the details, to lie, or to omit reasoning to their way of thinking. But yet people will believe it. And now comes to the point where they need to uphold that. And so this is why Moon in Scorpio shows somebody that attracts these complex interpersonal dynamics and psychological, situations, these complex psychological dynamics with others, and they get comfortable with that. But at the same time, it takes a lot of their energy, and it can feel draining. It can feel also with the Moon in Scorpio that you're always trying to prevent things from ending, or you're always trying to survive a certain situation, like make it continue, whether that's a relationship, whether that's your security, whether that's your way of life. And the next thing is that, with this placement, you're going to go through some sort of emotional transformation or ego death at some point in your life. Or you may have gone through that in different, in multiple times throughout your life, significant times. And those situations happened when a way of life ended for you, or like when a relationship ended, or when a form of security ended, like a job, or just a significant shift in your life, especially one that came in the form of a tower moment. So something that was very collapsive. And for you, this transformed or like forced you to shed your skin and go through an ego death. So, that's another thing that this placement shows. So anyways, as I was saying in the previous point, with Scorpio Moon, you just know that you're right. You don't really care how much it is justified. That's more of like a second thought to you. And you don't like people that think they are exposing your reasoning. And you don't like people that reason with like logic and rationale and try to confront your truth. So people that stand up to your opinions using, stronger rationale or logic than you, and try to prove to you that your feelings or your way of thinking is wrong. So that's why, Scorpio doesn't get along with Aquarius, at least astrologically. You could get along with Aquarius people with having a Scorpio placement. That's not what I'm saying, but it's more so Scorpio is a square to Aquarius. So in astrology, these signs are contradictory. And that's because, Aquarius is more detached and more logical and rational, and Scorpio is emotional and convinced. So these two can clash. And what it represents in a practical sense for your situation or for this placement is that these people clash with people who logically disagree with their emotions and try to consistently say that they're wrong, or like try to expose that they're wrong or that their reasoning is bad. So anyways, also they don't get along with emotionally detached people, or people that are overly rational, overly logical, and have no influence of emotion to their decision-making process. Because first of all, you can't really convince those people when you have this placement. And also, you find them very unemotional. You find like they can't feel that they're not empathetic, and so they will not understand you or your paradigm. So this is something that you may experience throughout your life multiple times, is clashing with overly logical or know-it-all people, especially when it gets to a personal level for you. outside in the workplace, maybe you don't clash with them. But when it gets to a point that, in a personal situation or in a family situation or in a relationship, and, somebody is like too logical and rational, and they disagree with you, this can create, never ending debates and like frustration. And they constantly try to shame the Scorpio moon for their emotions or for their way of feeling, which is just something that they cannot even help, So anyways, the whole point of, what I just said is, and the way to summarize it is that, someone that tells you otherwise than how you feel is very outraging to you, to Scorpio moon. Like, the whole point is basically anybody that tells a Scorpio moon otherwise than how they feel or what they deserve is like angering and frustrating. And that's because when it comes to matters of emotions, Scorpio moon needs to be right. So for that reason, they best get along with people who are emotionally caring, understanding, or allowing, and people that intuitively pick up that you are the one that's in control. Because with a moon in Scorpio, you have an emotional need for control. And so, yeah, that's just that. So something you will experience as a Scorpio moon, or with dealing with a Scorpio moon if you are not one, is the theme of gaslighting. And gaslighting is when somebody tells you you are wrong for your emotions. And when somebody convinces you otherwise. And this is something that Scorpio moons hate. And this is something that does not work on them because they have enormous emotional power, and because they are emotions, the moon is in a fixed sign, a fixed water sign. Fixed means never changing. So they can't help it, but the way that they feel is just solid. It just stays the same. And they can't help but to care about certain things or feel certain ways. So first of all, they get frustrated when somebody tries to tell them that they are wrong for the way that they feel or for their needs. Now, secondly, they also have this ability to unconsciously gaslight others because, simply put, they have a lot of emotional power. And in a room of two people where one is a moon in Scorpio, and the person that is the most emotionally convinced wins, then the Scorpio moon will always win. Because the way that they feel is always the same. And they are convinced of how they feel. Whereas, a different moon sign, such as the moon in Gemini, is able to be convinced otherwise. And this is what we call, gaslighting, is when somebody tells us the way that you feel is wrong, or here's how I feel for this and that reason. And then you start to think, maybe I am wrong. And then you start to doubt yourself. So really all that's going on is that the person that is most emotionally convinced is always going to win that battle. Or that's always going to be a theme that you experience with somebody who is very strongly emotionally convinced. Even if you're emotionally convinced too, there's going to be a lot of debating and a lot of competition between perspectives. So that is something else about this placement. So anyways, as I was saying, the next point is that you guys are most comfortable in situations of interpersonal dependence. So shared finances, shared home life, shared forms of security. And you will go through multiple emotional transformations throughout life because Scorpio is about transformation. And a lot of ego transformations when, not a lot, but like you'll go through at least one ego transformation. When something that you depended on collapses or changes. Because you're the type of person that constantly tries to prevent things from ending. And particularly things that you care about or people that you care about and dynamics like that. So, and these collapses happen through tower moments, collapses or complex situations that forced you to shed your old skin because you're very emotionally stubborn and you have a tie to your ego. Now, okay, next point, which is random and, an interesting fact, is that people that have the moon in Scorpio, they like private, shady, or reclusive homes. Places that are more secretive or, reclusive. And that's because the moon rules our home life. And Scorpio is about secrecy and shade. It's about things that are below the surface, about depth. So, in general, they just need secrecy and privacy to feel comfortable. The next fact about this placement is it shows somebody that has that is innately sexual and has a constant sex drive, because Scorpio is about sexuality and it's about desire. So they have a strong desire nature, and they always feel motivated to acquire more of what they need in a general sense, because Scorpio is about a constant way of feeling. It rules recurring feelings. So, sex is a recurring feeling. It's something that you satisfy and then it comes back. It rules hunger and it rules survival. It rules appetite. So on an emotional level, these people always tend to need more and more, and they never feel fully emotionally fulfilled. It's like every time they leave an emotion, they come back to it. And they just need it on a regular basis, or like more of it. So, to summarize, something that you always feel is like you're preventing things from ending when you have the moon in Scorpio, especially in an interpersonal sense, or like a survival sense, or some sort of living situation, or it could just be an ego sense. Now, anyways, that is moon in Scorpio. And to summarize, it's somebody that has a lot of emotional depth and that is very emotionally convincing. And their emotions become a part of their ego because their emotions stay fixed. And sometimes it's just something that they can't help. So their emotions become something very powerful and like dear to their heart. And that's why they like to be more secretive about their emotions. And, if somebody starts to clash with their emotions, they're actually entering dangerous territory. And so the final thing too, that goes along with this is that these people, they will kill for what it is that they care about or who it is that they care about. And they get very jealous about things that they care about when they are threatened by an external competitor or someone who doesn't respect their emotional space or the ego that they've built around the things that they care about. And, they have an obsessive quality about the things that they care about. Maintaining this ego that they have around their emotions can feel exhausting for them. But, and they get, frustrated sometimes with not helping but to feel things. So sometimes, always the feeling of always feeling can get exhausting to them. So sometimes they get tired of feeling. This is like, this sounds kind of like depression. And so that could be something like, I didn't mean to allude to depression, but this is like, a sensation that on a low vibration, Scorpio moon can manifest as at times, periods of depression. So, but it doesn't mean that you are, meant to experience depression with this placement, necessarily. Like, not all Scorpio moons will have that manifestation, but this feeling of always having to maintain control over what it is that they care about for a deep emotional reason, and the ego that gets you in that position, and the need to uphold those things, can get exhausting. And and so they will feel that emotional fatigue over certain situations, especially if they become repetitive or never ending. Now, so that basically sums up this placement. I hope you guys enjoyed and that it was insightful. And if you did and you learned something about yourself or others in this video, then don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to this channel if you'd like to see more content. Other than that, I appreciate you guys watching and supporting in any way that you do. And I will talk to you guys sometime soon in another video. Peace.